Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So I thought I'd just talk briefly tonight about view. I've been rewriting a lot of my books, and in every book that I've written there is some discussion very early on, usually in the introduction, about view and what view is. On one level, view teachings are the most important teachings you'll get from any teacher. And they are, as many of you know, the context or the umbrella that you're sitting under when you're doing practice in a particular tradition. So view teachings answer questions like, what does this tradition say about the nature of reality? What does this tradition have to say about God? What does this tradition have to say about the purpose of spiritual life? What does this tradition have to say about the nature of the individual? What does this tradition say about human relationships? What does this tradition say about death and being born? And any aspect of living. So these really big questions are the subject of view teachings. And then when we get to learn individual practices, view teachings are the bigger level of understanding of what the practice is about. So, for instance, the practice that we just learned, I could have just said, chant Om at these bindus. But instead, I told you what the bindus represented and that the practice was a purification practice and what that meant. So those are view teachings. And what happens is, if you have view teachings, then when you go to do a practice, you have a kind of a beacon. You have some idea of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the bigger picture, the bigger context for that practice, so that you don't just make something up. If I had just said, here are these 3 bindus, chant Om, you could have made up any number of stories about those bindus, right? You would have filled in something, because we always want to know why and what and how and all those questions. And if I didn't tell you, you would just come up with your own thing. And it would probably be a mishmash of your direct experience and whatever spiritual traditions you grew up with and what you read in some yoga magazine last week, and could be anything. So view teachings help us to practice better, because they kind of keep us on track, understanding what it is that we're doing, so that we don't fall into fantasy or just start making stuff up. But the most important thing about view teachings is that they are transmissions. And this is why view teachings are not philosophy. Okay. So they are not information. They are not merely descriptions. They are not merely explanations. So view teachings actually, if you're given view teachings by someone who's done practice and has realized some of the fruits of a particular practice or the tradition that they're teaching in, then that view teaching is said to carry the Vidya Shakti, or the wisdom energy of that tradition or that practice. And that energy speaks to you in a direct way, non-verbally. So you can have not just an intellectual understanding of something, but you can feel something, whether consciously or unconsciously, so that when you then go to do a practice, you're sort of not starting from zero, right? You're starting somewhere else. People will often say, when I did this practice in the teaching, felt this way, but when I got home, it felt another way. This is because when you're in the teaching, you're in a transmission environment that you can recognize. So the thing that you should be doing is trying to re-enter into that experience of being in transmission when you're not around the teacher. That's a big part of the practice. And you can learn to do that, right? It's like learning how to get to the grocery store without GPS. You eventually can do that, right? What I noticed when I've been rewriting these books and writing many, many things about view is that it leaves out something that is of the utmost value. Because any teaching about view, even a teaching about the nature of absolute reality, any view teaching is relative. There's a wonderful book. It's called Machig's Explanation. It's about 400 pages long. It was written by the two principal students, direct students of Machig Lapdron, a Tibetan yogini. And she brought the practice of Chud into the human realm. This is a practice that is widely used in a lot of Buddhist traditions. It has different forms, many different forms. Some forms are more like puja, other forms are done in cremation grounds. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. I knew a yogini in Eugene, Oregon. She was from Tibet, and her whole life was spent doing Chud, and she taught Chud. And I was, really privileged to be able to sit in on some of what she did and in some of her teachings and learn about these different forms of the practice. So basically, the practice is a ritual giving away of your body. This is where you see people with the drums and the thigh bones and the skull cups, and there's a visualization that goes along with the long and more fierce form of the practice, which is normally done in cremation grounds, where you visualize animals and other beings and hungry ghosts and other human beings who need food. You're just ritually offering them every single speck of your body. So, two of Machig Lapdron's students wrote this practice down in its long form. There are shorter forms too. It goes through this gruesome detail in this book. It's highly visual, every little instruction about how to do this for hundreds of pages. And of course, because it's a Tibetan text, there's many, many mentions of view. What is the correct view to practice with? At the end of the book, in the last few pages, Machig's disciples report, and Machig said, the ultimate Chud is hold no view. The ultimate thing that we can give away, ritually or otherwise, is our view of everything. Our view of ourselves, our view of other people, our view of the nature of reality, our spiritual view. That's what Machig Lapdron said was the ultimate practice of Chud. Forget about all these visualizations. Forget about the cool skull and the cool thigh bone that you can blow sound out of. Forget about cremation grounds. Forget about all these mantras. Just hold no view. This kind of teaching is also repeated in our tradition, where in some tantras it says that all of the view teachings are for babies. They're for people who are ignorant, who have very little realization. So it's basically saying the same thing. That the view that we're taught, that's so all important, that keeps getting reinforced, has an expiration date. And that expiration date comes when we are so immersed in presence that there really isn't anything to have a view of. There is only that 100% experience of call and response within that immersion. And there's no need to define it or label it or create a structure to understand it or attached to ideas about it. You're simply living in it. Laleshwari, the poet from Kashmir, wrote about this too. She said, in the end, there's nothing but a something, a faded something on a road. She said, Shiva and Shakti even don't matter. Right? Those weren't her exact words, but that was her meaning, right? So view itself is relative to our experience as people who have a certain degree of ignorance and are still experiencing some separation. So it's like view is a tool, view is a technology, view is a transmission, view is a structure that helps us eventually to let go of structure, a structured way of relating to things, or a way of relating to things that has an explanation or has names or has some sort of, truth. Right? We don't talk about truth here, but many traditions relate to their view of reality as the truth. That in and of itself is an aspect of a view teaching, that there is truth. That's a view teaching. That's a view. When you are just simply immersed in living presence, you don't care about truth. When you're swimming in a river, you don't think about, is this river true? Am I having the most true experience of this river? Is my experience is this a moral, ethical experience of this river? What is my view of me swimming in this river? We don't think that way when we're swimming in a river because we don't need to. We just swim in it. And that's exactly analogous to what I'm talking about. However, you do need view up until you get to that point. Because if you have no view and you are not immersed in presence, then you're just kind of a bumbler. You got nothing. So view is absolutely necessary until we have enough contact with presence that we no longer need it. And the interesting thing is that, I'm just talking from my personal experience, as sexy as that might sound, it's very hard to let go of view. That's why Machig said it is the ultimate austerity, basically, or the ultimate chud, the ultimate ritual sacrifice. Giving away your whole body. That's a gruesome thing. And in chud, if you're doing the fierce version, you imagine not just giving it away, but you imagine all those other beings eating your body. So you have to get very, very graphic about it. And the idea is that you're relinquishing attachment and you're discovering this kind of wholesale generosity. And Machig's saying that hold no view is fiercer than that. After becoming very attached to teachings and our ways of thinking about things and talking about things in our tradition, our way of understanding reality, using the view of our tradition. After learning all that and practicing with it and really getting it into our system for decades on end, to then be confronted with the understanding that it's not really necessary. It takes a while to get used to that, talking from personal experience. Right? It takes a while to let go of all that. So I just brought that up because I was really struck in reading these books that I've written before, and I'm now reworking how much emphasis there is on view, how that is necessary, but we need to understand the biggest picture, which is that this is all provisional. I've said sometimes, one day I hope we're just together, not talking about any of this. Right, just living.
Question: is it possible to let go of any view little by little, like gradually?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's something anyone would decide to do. I'm again just talking from personal experience. You just start to feel it's a little beside the point, right? It's like anything worthwhile in spiritual life, and this is rock bottom how it is. things just become apparent. You don't decide how to be. You don't decide what to think. You don't decide how to feel. You don't try to feel some way or try to think some way or try to see some way. You're just doing your practice and things just happen. They become obvious, or they become an imperative, or your reality is moving you in a certain direction and you're following. You're not deciding how to be. So gradually, yes, but not through a process that you're in control of or that you decide on. Gradually, in that view starts to seem a little awkward or unnecessary, or your attachments start to feel a little stale. And then there's resistance to letting it go. I've experienced, right? So it's far from trying to let go of you. There's, probably more trying to hold on to it. And that's, the way that it always happens, is we're always trying to hold on to stuff that we should just let go of.
What is the action of letting go of you?
Well, great question. For instance, I used to have a bazillion pictures of gurus all over my room and statues, and, I'd have 4 different altars and my travel altar, and everything had to be perfect, and all my puja. And now it's when I do puja, I'm just it doesn't feel any different than when I'm not doing puja. Formal puja doesn't really feel different, and I could very well never do puja again if it weren't for you guys. I feel like I'm doing it for you, not for me anymore. My altars have now boiled down to 1, and there's hardly anything on my altar, and I don't really care if there's anything on there at all. I mean, I could sit in front of a refrigerator and feel the same way. But but I still love beautiful things, so I have a couple beautiful things, but I don't really feel like I need to be in a special place with special objects and special implements and special gestures, and yet it's hard to let go of all that, right? It's very slowly let go of all that.
You talking about your puja thing made me wonder where the confluence of formality and naturalness is. Because I feel like some formality can hinder the naturalness. So
Well, really, all that matters is what the naturalness is informed by. If naturalness is laziness or stagnation or whateverness, that isn't what I'm talking about. If naturalness is you're just experiencing natural devotion, I mean, I just feel like I'm experiencing that all the time. So I could be worshiping a toothbrush, but then again, I'm still attached to certain, so it's sort of, still, is it really okay? So let's not fool ourselves. So there's that kind of, I think, special non-dual brand of spiritual bypassing, which is basically just laziness, right? So there's various flavors of spiritual bypassing. And of course, there's a sort of transcendental version of it where you work very, very hard to prove to everyone that you've transcended X, Y, or Z, and that you're now an ascended master, and blah, blah. But that's a different version of spiritual. But our version of spiritual bypassing is, it's all one, it's all the self. There's nothing actually happening, so I just won't do anything. I'm not going to do puja because what's the point? It's just self doing puja to self. So there's a kind of stagnant, lazy quality to non-dual spiritual bypassing. Unless you really are having maybe somewhat full-time experience of being in contact with presence or immersed in presence, and you have a lot of clarity that's dawned over time, then you're still in the zone of doing a lot of practice. Right? That's what the practices are for, to move you into the direction where you don't need to do them, but you need to do them in order to get that kind of clarity, to have that kind of contact with presence. If you don't have that incontrovertible confidence in presence, ability to connect with it, even if you've lost it momentarily, ability to connect with it instantly, that feeling of immersion. If you don't have that most of the time, then what I'm talking about is in your future, not your present.
It sounded like the hold no view is kind of like, it's not, you're not choosing it, so it sounds like it's something that slowly kind of emerges through your sadhana.
Yeah.
And so if hold no view is the ultimate austerity or whatever, it seems like there's some way you could think of it as a thing that needs to be.
Well, there's always some kind of collaboration between, I want my Mortise! And, give me my toothbrush. There's a lot of territory.
Yeah.
Everything that we are relinquishing or that's being stripped away or falling away, there's always participation from us, right? We have to say yes, and we have to allow ourselves to kind of more courageously meet nature where nature is calling us, right? So there's definitely some call and response happening in these vast interzones. It requires courage. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.